Well, I'm here this morning to talk about stories, the stories that we're in. I love stories. As a kid, I grew up with all kinds of stories. You probably did too. There's one that I want to read to you this morning that you're probably familiar with. Goldilocks and the Three? No. Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs. Once upon a time, there were three dinosaurs. Papa Dinosaur, Mama Dinosaur, and some other dinosaur who happened to be visiting from Norway. One day, for no particular reason, the three dinosaurs made up their beds, positioned their chairs just so, and cooked 3 bowls of delicious chocolate pudding at varying temperatures. "Oh boy," said Papa Dinosaur in his loud, booming voice. "It is finally time to leave and go to the, someplace else." "Hey, yes," continued Mama Dinosaur, "and I sure hope no innocent little succulent child happens by our unlocked home while we are, someplace else." The other dinosaur made a loud noise that sounded like a big evil laugh, but was probably just a polite Norwegian expression. The three dinosaurs went someplace else and were definitely not hiding in the woods waiting for an unsuspecting kid to come by. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a poorly supervised little girl named Goldilocks came traipsing along. Just then, the forest boomed with what could have been a dinosaur yelling, "Gotcha!" But I'm pretty sure it was just the wind. The loud noise was immediately followed by another loud noise that sounded kind of like, "Be patient, Papa Dinosaur, the trap is not yet sprung." But that could have been a rock falling or a squirrel. Either way, Goldilocks was not the type of little girl who listened to anyone or anything. For instance, Goldilocks never listened to warnings about the dangers of barging into strange, enormous houses. So as soon as Goldilocks came across a strange, enormous house, she barged right in. Inside, Goldilocks immediately smelled the 3 bowls of delicious chocolate pudding. Said Goldilocks. "That chocolate pudding smells delicious. If I could only get all the way up to that counter." Then Goldilocks noticed a very tall ladder that just happened to be there and certainly wasn't left there on purpose. Goldilocks climbed up the ladder and found herself face to face with 3 gigantic bowls of chocolate pudding. The first bowl of chocolate pudding was too hot, but Goldilocks ate it all anyway because, hey, it's chocolate pudding, right? Second bowl of chocolate pudding was too cold. But who cares about temperature when you've got a big bowl of chocolate pudding? Not her. The third bowl of chocolate pudding was just right. But Goldilocks was on such a roll by now that she hardly noticed. Soon, Goldilocks was stuffed, like one of those delicious chocolate-filled little girl bonbons, which, by the way, are totally not the favorite things in the whole world for hungry dinosaurs. Tired and groggy, Goldilocks noticed 3 chairs in the living room. So she climbed down the ladder and walked out of the kitchen. The first chair was too tall. The second chair was too tall. But the third chair was too tall. Goldilocks wasn't going to climb that high just to sit in some chair, so she hiked over to the bedroom. When she got there, Goldilocks noticed that the beds were also gigantically big. "What's going on around here?" groaned the exhausted girl. "The bears that live here must be nuts." Just then, the room filled with a loud, booming noise that was either a passing truck or a dinosaur gloating, "A few more minutes and she'll be asleep. Delicious chocolate-filled little girl bonbons are yummier when they're rested." Well, let's pause the story right there. We'll get back to it here in a few minutes. Stories. Our life is made up of stories. Stories that have all kind of plots and trouble and conflict and things like this in it. I love stories. When I was in the 5th grade, my favorite textbook was the geography textbook. It was this massive book that had maps of continents and oceans and all this stuff in it, and I could set it up on the front of my desk and hide my Hardy Boys mystery novel right there in the middle of it. And the teacher would look at me, and she would see me, and she would think she had another little Magellan in the making as my nose was deep in the geography book. Little did she know, I had left her classroom a long time ago, and I was right in the middle of a Hardy Boys mystery novel trying to help those brothers solve the latest crime. Stories. Donald Miller says a story is a character who wants something and has to overcome conflict to get it. Another Donald, a guy named Donald Davis, who is the president of the Appalachian Mountain Storytellers Association, and boy, those people can tell great stories. He says you don't have a story until somebody gets in trouble. And he said then every story ends in one of three ways. Either we get help, or we learn something, or we get stuck in the trouble, which turns the story then into a tragedy. So I've come here this morning to ask you a very simple question. How's your story going? How is the story that you are living playing out these days? As I observe humans, it appears to me that we really don't like the story that we're caught in. I mean, I'm watching people try to reinvent themselves all the time and transition things about themselves and find themselves in other kind of stories. I actually think that this sense of not being at home within our own story, that this is a part of why reality TV has become so popular here in America. I mean, we can tune in and pick an amazing race pair, and we will go with them to places we would never take ourselves. Or we can tune in to the most outwitting person in the tribe, and we can sort of align ourselves with them and hope they find the hidden idols and do all this stuff so that at the end of the show that we can say, I picked the survivor, the one who survived was me. Or we can, if we don't like our story, we can hijack somebody else's story. We can go live in the Kardashian story. Or we can live with the real housewives of Atlanta, those who are out there. Or we can dance our way to stardom, tossed into the air by dancing professionals, and imagine in our own minds, I could do that. You know, if I had a dancing partner like that, I could probably do that. Or we could croon our way into a different life on The Voice or American Idol. All of this reality TV, what it does is it's saying to us, hijack your way into these stories. Live out of these stories. And if reality TV doesn't do it for us, maybe sports would. So we pick our team, wear the logo, we know the stats, we talk the line, we live for the next game. It's that sense of this team becomes my story in life. And I kind of revolve and organize my dress, my life, my conversation all around this thing. Or if that doesn't work, we follow somebody on Twitter, knowing that our life will be more important if I happen to know this very second that Taylor Swift is eating a piece of pizza in a Nashville restaurant right now. And we live in all of these stories. Or we just go on YouTube and we scroll everybody else's story for hours on end, and we find something with that. Stories. When we can't deal with the trouble in our own story, somehow we want to hijack our way into other stories that are out there. Now, some people, I'll admit, though, don't do that. Some people are so stuck in their own story that they can't get out of it. You call that a tragedy. It's where my problems are so big that the whole world ought to stop what it's doing and pay attention to me. Because the truth is, I'm a victim. I'm a victim. I'm a victim. I don't like the scenes I have to show up in. I don't like the lines I have to say. I don't like the co-stars who share the stage with me. Everything that's done to me is intentional. What's asked of me is unfair and unreasonable. World, stop. Pay attention to what I'm going through right now. But of course, that would be none of us who are here in this room right now. Why do we wrestle so much inside our own story? Why do we have trouble owning it and addressing it and moving into better stories than the ones that we happen to be living right now? I think I know why. Every one of us wants our life to be interesting. We want our life to be interesting. You do, I do, we all do. Jürgen Moltmann, famous theologian, said this: to be human is to be interested. And right there may be the heart of our problem. We want our life to be interesting, but we are not interested enough to address the things in our life that would make it different than what it is. It's not that we lack the raw material. I mean, in every direction that we look, there's the stuff to make an interesting life out of. There's ideas and music and places and education and conversation and wisdom and friends and mentors. And I mean, everywhere you look, there's the raw material of life that is there. And in the middle of all of this, we believe that our God is at work in all of these old dying stories, making everything new. We believe that our God, whose Son experienced crucifixion, is the God who raises out of death into new life that which is forever being made new and is beautiful in every way. We believe that our God is redeeming us from the traps and trouble that we get caught in. We believe that our God forgives our haunting sins that make our life so hard and heavy and uninteresting. We believe that our God is liberating out of the addictions that trap us in our tragedies. We believe that our God is transforming these minds of ours that cannot see anything but the old and is making us new and teaching us to think new. We believe that our God is resurrecting the dying story that we live in to introduce us into the living story of Jesus Christ. Are you interested in this? Are you interested in this? Are you interested enough to leave the story of selfishness and move into the story of service? Are you interested enough to leave the form of religion and walk into a living relationship with Jesus Christ? Are you interested enough to leave the story of being a tipper to God and step into the story of being a tither to God? Are you interested enough to move from half-hearted belief into full-bodied discipleship and following of Jesus Christ? A lot of us are trapped in the wrong story. And God is at work bringing us into a different story that is there. Are we interested enough to know how God does that and how God helps us? Now, I'm thinking this morning of a biblical character that is introduced as Saul of Tarsus. We meet him there in Acts 8, 9, 10, and he is a Hebrew of the Hebrews, tribe of Benjamin, Pharisee, perfect in terms of keeping the law. I mean, he has all the credential that is necessary. And he finds himself opposing the resurrected Jesus in the city of Jerusalem just weeks after the resurrection occurs. And we meet him as he holds the coats of the people who stoned Stephen, the first Christian martyr. He gets such a high out of this that he goes to the scribes and the Pharisees, he goes to the chief priests, and he says to them, hey, if you guys, I did that in the first service too, I just keep dropping these. But he says, if you guys will give me letters of authority, I'll go city to city and I'll hunt these Christians down. I'll find them and we will persecute them because this heresy that they're proclaiming about a resurrected Messiah is just not in keeping with our Jewish tradition. This is just not it. And so they do. They give him the letters. And so Saul becomes a persecutor of the church. But something happens to him. And I'll let him tell his own story. It's in Acts chapter 26 and verse 12. Let me read to you what he says. He says, I was traveling to Damascus with the authority of the chief priest to persecute Christians. When at noon along the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and my companions. And I heard a voice that said to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up, stand on your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you to serve and to testify about me among the Gentiles, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light, turn from the power of Satan to the power of God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among the holy ones. And all of a sudden, the role once played by Saul of Tarsus is being played by Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles. This transition from this story into this story happens in his life on that day on the road to Damascus. Do you guys remember a few years ago where we had these things called cardboard testimony meetings? It was kind of cool. They would bring a long line of people out on a platform, and they would all be holding a piece of cardboard about this big, and they'd taken a magic marker, and they'd written on the front of it who they used to be, and then they met Jesus, and they would flip it over, and it would say who they are now. One guy comes out, and he's holding this, and his says, drunk every weekend. And he would flip it over, and it says, leader of a Bible study. The next person, she would be holding it, it would say, suicidal and lost. She'd flip it over, found and at peace with Jesus Christ. The next one would come out, and it would be greedy consumer. And then they'd flip it over, and it would say joyful giver. I mean, testimony after testimony. This was my story. This is my story. Well, if Saul of Tarsus were in that line, he'd walk out on the platform, and his would say, Saul, Pharisee, keeper of the law, persecutor of the church. And he would flip it over, and it would say, Paul, living in the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. What happened to him? What happened to him out there on the road to Damascus? The word, it's kind of a fancy church word that we use, but the word would be he was evangelized. Evangelized. Now, we don't use that word a whole lot, but my favorite definition of evangelism is telling somebody into a better story. And that's what Jesus did to him on the road that day. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? You've been this. But stand up, get on your feet, because this is what you're about to do. You're about to be the one who opens the eyes of people so that they can see how to move from darkness into light, how to move from the power of Satan into the power of God, how to move from a form of religion to a true holiness in terms of relationship with God. He is told into a better story on that road. Denise and I were in Chicago a few years ago, and we were having dinner with a good friend. She was going through a horrible divorce. I mean, I just have to say it in every way. What was happening to her was just hard, really hard. Losing a marriage. The person that she had been married to was enormously wealthy, and she was, in all honesty, quite poor. Had no ability to defend herself in a court of law and try to hang on to a child. And she was just pouring all this out to us. And I remember she kind of got to the end of the description and she said to us, the pain is so intense, I don't even know what to call it. And in that moment, I sensed the presence of God there with us. And I said, I know what to call it. You call this crucifixion. You're being crucified. And I paused for a moment to let that just sink in. And then I said, and I know someone else who was crucified and came through it to live again. And I began to tell her the story of Jesus. Evangelism is naming the activity of God in the old story where a person already is, but not stopping there, but telling them into the new story of Jesus Christ and the resurrection that happens. And as I began to tell her that, I saw hope begin to take light in her eyes. And I saw posture change because she was beginning to believe that I'm not stuck in this in a way I can't get out of it, but God in His newness is opening a way into a very new and different story. In the earlier service today, I just sat over there and wept as we watched lines of people come down these aisles and go into the baptistry. They were trading their old story for a new story. The old them went down, and the new them came up. We buried old stories that new stories might come to life in this beautiful way. This story of God in Jesus Christ is the only story that can make all things new. It is the only story that can move us from death to life. It is the only story that redeems us from darkness. It is the only story that delivers us from the enslaving power of Satan. It is the only story that ends in resurrection. And it is a story that is so interesting that it makes our lives interesting in every way. So I have to ask you again, how's your story going? Just then, the room filled with a loud, booming noise that was either a passing truck or a dinosaur gloating, "Ha ha, a few more minutes and she'll be asleep." Delicious chocolate-filled little girl bonbons are yummier when they're rested. Even a little girl who never listens to anything or anyone had to hear that. Goldilocks took a minute to stop and think, which was longer than she was used to stopping and thinking. Hey, she told herself, this isn't some bear's house. This is some dinosaur's house. And say what you like about Goldilocks, but she was no fool. As quickly as she could, she ran to the back door and got out of there. Just then, a loud plane flew by, which sounded pretty much like a trio of dinosaurs yelling, "Now!" or "Charge!" or the Norwegian expression for chewy bonbon time. Suddenly and completely coincidentally, the three dinosaurs rushed through the front door, but they were too late. Goldilocks was gone, and all that was left in the house were three disappointed dinosaurs. The end. And the moral is, if you ever find yourself in the wrong story, leave.